Lineup is a big thing for the Calgary Flames as we take a look at some of the top free agents that could be set to hit the market. Of course, the biggest surprise could be Evgeny Malkin and his situation in Pittsburgh. Malkin's been waiting for the phone to ring, checking that the ringer is indeed on. But no calls yet from the Pens, and it looks like he's had enough and will test the market, according to reports. Nazem Kadri, of course, who won the Stanley Cup with the Colorado Avalanche, also set to hit free agency, along with Evander Kane, who was the leading scorer for the Edmonton Oilers during their playoff run. All right, for more on the Malkin situation and the other free agents of note, let's bring in CBS Sports HQ NHL analyst Alan May. Alan, you heard Treliving's comments last week about Johnny Hockey, Gaudreau. How confident are you at this point that they can get a deal done to keep him in Calgary?
Well, it sounds like if it's gone this far, that they definitely just have to up the money and make sure that they get a max 8-year contract, because, they're not going to be able to match the dollars on a 7-year contract anywhere else. And, there's trade bait if it doesn't happen. But I think that it's gone this long. It's just a matter of, liar's poker right now and getting to the right dollar amount. We know it's going to be 8 years. And I can't imagine Johnny Hockey and the Calgary Flames not being together. But once again, we've heard so many rumors linked to New Jersey, linked to Philadelphia. And I'm sure every team in the National Hockey League would like a crack at him. I could only think how incredible it would be if he was playing with Draisaitl and McDavid in Edmonton, just to throw that one out there. But just an incredible hockey player, and he deserves everything he gets because he's been a wow factor since becoming an NHL player. His very first game, he was doing things that were shocking to people. And I think last year, his best year ever, and certainly in a contract year, it was the right time to do it.
Alan, if you're linking Gaudreau with the Oilers, you're playing with gas, my friend. You're playing with gas. As a guy who grew up between Edmonton and Calgary, I know how tough that rivalry is. So if they can't get a deal done, you did throw out, we say the Oilers at this point, but seriously, if they don't get a deal done, who do you think would be, let's say, the top 3 suitors for Johnny Gaudreau?
Well, certainly the New York Rangers. They're all in all the time, and it seems like they're letting all of their trade acquisitions at the end of the season test free agency. And so that means that there's money on the table there. Johnny Gaudreau is a finisher. He's an incredible player in the power play. He's unique. But I would take the New York Rangers, the New Jersey Devils, who have a ton of cap space, and they've got some great young pieces on their roster. Now you have the Philadelphia Flyers, and we don't know what type of mode they're in right now, but I believe Johnny grew up closer to Philly than he did to where the New Jersey Devils play. So those 3 teams seem like the most likely fits. And, there's nothing like going home. I think it's always tough when you make a geographical decision, but he's such a great player. I think he's successful no matter where he goes.
Well, Calgary fans will certainly be hoping that he stays with the Flames. Okay, what about the Malkin situation? Are you surprised to see him at the point where he's at right now with the Penguins? I don't want to call it a standoff, but perhaps a little bit of one. He's waiting for the Pens to call. They haven't yet, but he could possibly be moving on. How surprised are you with the situation with Malkin and the Pens right now?
There's obviously a number discrepancy there. It's term and it's the total dollar amount every season. He's been such a phenomenal player for them. He was drafted number 2 overall a long, long time ago. And we look at what he's been able to do. He's been a Stanley Cup champion many times. And he's been there when Sidney's been out of the lineup, Sidney Crosby. He stepped right in and stepped up and has performed so well. But I think at this point, one of the things you have to be wary about as the Pittsburgh Penguins is that he's had a couple of ACL injuries, and that's cost him some time. He's older than Chris Letang, who just re-signed a contract, 6 times $6.1 million a year, I think. And I had heard that Letang was being offered 4 times $9 million potentially from other teams out there, and that the Penguins had gotten word of that. So I'm not sure if they want to go that long or that high in the dollars with Evgeny Malkin, with coming off a bad knee and not being able to play as much last season as they would have liked to, and certainly he would have liked to. But it's, once again, it's so hard to imagine. I think one of the things when you've won Stanley Cups with players and they do get older, I know in the past teams have talked about we hung on to our guys too long, but your superstars, I think you kind of owe it to your fan base, your team, to kind of ride it out with those guys and see where they go. So I'm still not sold that he's walking away. And these are tough decisions when players have to do this. But if I'm, more than half of the teams out there in the National Hockey League, you got to find a way to get this guy if he's available, because you'd have a great 1-2 punch on so many teams.
Yeah, a team that would be looking to contend for a Stanley Cup could certainly use a guy like Malkin, even with the injury history and even with his age, given what he's done with the Penguins. All right, Florida Panthers a team that were Stanley Cup contenders, President's Trophy winners. Then they fired their head coach. They brought in former Winnipeg Jets head coach Paul Maurice. Now they're letting Claude Giroux go after his short stint in SoFlo. What does the future hold for Giroux?
Well, it's interesting. I still love the way he plays. I believe that he's not a first-line player. And I think he's a great man on the second line, the third line. And the fact that he can play left wing, right wing, center, he's one of the best face-off men in the NHL. He seems like he is, a guy that doesn't get injured a whole lot. And he just adds so much to a team. And, I say if you're a team like the Washington Capitals, even the Pittsburgh Penguins, if Malkin walks, he's a guy that you take a look at. A lot of people have linked him to his hometown of the Ottawa Senators, who are on the cusp of becoming a very, very good hockey team with the young talent they've loaded up on. But it's hard to imagine, and I find it somewhat shocking at the same time, that the Panthers, for what they paid for him at the end of the season, that they would let him walk. So there's definitely a difference in probably term more than anything versus short-term money.
And Giroux would certainly be. Here's another guy, right? You talk about grit, right? You talk about teams that want to add a little bit of veteran presence and a little bit of grit. Guy who's got some good experience, Giroux, certainly fits that. A number of teams would certainly be interested in his services. The Edmonton Oilers have told their playoff leading scorer, Evander Kane, that he can explore the free agent market. Kane, a controversial signing to begin with, and general manager Ken Holland isn't keen on giving Kane a long-term deal. So he's kind of hoping that Kane goes out there, tests the market, not a lot there, circles back to the Oilers. Do you expect anyone else to be in the market for Kane, given his history?
I absolutely do. How he performed this season, there was no smoke, there was no fire off of the ice in Edmonton with him. And that's a small market. It is a fishbowl. And he performed so well on the ice. He was excellent in the playoffs. But I was told yesterday from people inside the Edmonton organization that they're not even close on dollar amount. So I would expect pretty much every team in the East would be after him. And it's one of those things. This is such a good hockey player. And really, in the games that I've covered over the years, that I've actually been in the arena watching this guy, he's never had a bad game. And from what I saw this season, he's worth taking a chance on. And, there's so much gossip, rumor, innuendo that's gone on with him. And there's also the facts that he's had some financial difficulty with some of the things that have gone on. But at the same time, it's about the performance on the ice. And the way he performed this season, for a guy that didn't play the first half of the season, he was phenomenal. So he's definitely worth a chance. A lot of teams out there, they've got to think long and hard. If they're not in rebuild mode, if they're in win now, he's the guy you take a stab at.
Nashville announced today that the team has signed forward Philip Forsberg to an 8-year, $68 million contract that carries an average annual value of $8.5 million. He is the franchise's leading scorer, and it looks, Alan, like he's going to end his career with the Predators.
I don't think there's any way they could have let him go. And, you look at some of the players they've had over the years that didn't perform up to their contract until this last season, namely Duchesne and Johansson. But the one guy that's always been there for them since they got him in that awful trade with the Washington Capitals is Philip Forsberg, who is such a gritty two-way player, who's got a great touch around the net. He seems like he's all in every single game. And they got him it was always rumored that they had to pay him more than Duchesne and Johansson. And they weren't going to go over the level of Roman Josi. You take into consideration that Tennessee has no state tax. So you'd have to get a lot more money elsewhere in a 7-year term to total that. So David Poile, I never had any doubt that David Poile and Philip Forsberg, the Nashville Predators, would all come together and get this deal done and make sure that he never spent 1 second in free agency, because he's a player that any team now and that believes that they're in top contention to win the Stanley Cup, you've got to go after a guy like that. He is worth the risk. He's been durable. He provides you great goal scoring, two-way play. He can play penalty kill, power play, 5-on-5. He is excellent. He's a puck possession guy. So they had to make sure they did this to show that their fans are still in and trying to compete every single season.
Yeah, you talk about one of those guys that's one of your franchise players. You want to hang on to him at all costs, and Nashville certainly doing that today. Tampa Bay have some decisions to make after 3 straight appearances in the Stanley Cup final. What should we expect to see from the Lightning as free agency opens up?
Well, I would not be surprised tomorrow. I cannot see them letting Andre Palat go. He's been so important for them. And one of the things that I read today, and I hadn't really thought of that, the only guy that he's ever played for as a head coach, and whether it was in the American Hockey League or the National Hockey League, has been John Cooper. And he was so valuable for them in these playoffs. And actually, the last 3 seasons, Plata has been excellent for them. So I believe they have to find a way to keep him. He is 30. I believe he's 31 years old. They've got to do what they can. He's an excellent passer and playmaker. He scores timely goals. He's there at all times. And there's so many other players that they have on the roster that overshadow him. But I believe these are the other guys that win you the Stanley Cup. So your big name stars, they're always going to give you, create offense and win games. But it's the other guys who help you win series. And Andre Palat is one of those guys I think would be a huge hole. And we've seen them find a way to make things happen with their very important players the last few seasons and find a way to come to terms. And maybe it's another year or 2 on his contract. But right now, to me, he's got to be their number one priority of getting it done. I know they've got some players coming up with, contracts, younger players that are coming up with big contracts, but he's been so reliable for them. And I still think that they're a team that's in Stanley Cup contention. They need a little rest. They need a little recovery, and they'll be right back at it next year. And I'm still a believer that Vasilevsky is the number one goalie in the National Hockey League. So while you've got these guys, these A1 type of players, you've got to find a way to keep this guy, who's a glue guy for the Tampa Bay Lightning, and keep him on your roster.
Love how you put that, glue guy. Great hockey term. We love it. And Jan Rutta, of course, a guy they want to shore up at the back end as well in front of Vasilevsky. Right. Forsberg, Philip Forsberg, not the only one to get an 8-year extension on Monday. Colorado giving Valeri Nichushkin an 8-year deal worth $49 million. Average annual value there just over $6 million. The Avs looking to run it back. How important is getting Nichushkin locked in?
Well, I thought it was a lot of money and a long term, and I thought there would be a little less money for that 8-year term. But you look at how great he was in this year's playoffs, and he's been a great fit for the Colorado Avalanche. And one of the things you look at, he's 6'4". He's a power forward. He played so well in the playoffs for them. He can skate. He can score. And it looks like they're going to have to sacrifice some of their other players with letting him go. And it all depends. There's some other key names that they need to keep on this team. And they did load up at the trade deadline with some other guys. But right now, it's the guy that they had, and they brought back. He didn't do very well at the Dallas Stars in his last go-around there. But how he's fit in with the Colorado Avalanche, only time will tell if it's a bad contract. When you think of it, if we wouldn't have had these pandemic-shortened seasons, costing the NHL and the NHL Players Association so much revenue, the salary cap would probably be in the low 90 millions right now instead of 82.5 where it's at. So maybe they're hedging their bet that NHL revenues and full seasons, not losing games to pandemics and playing in empty arenas, that the salary cap will go up enough in the future that this contract won't hamper them. But he's still of great age. He is a guy that played with so much heart, determination, and courage in the playoffs. Couldn't walk into the arenas, but he was finding a way to get on the ice and score some big goals.
Alan, any of these guys on the screen right now back with the Avs, or do you see them being on other teams through free agency?
Well, I think the big thing when you look at it, one of those guys scored 8 goals in the playoffs. Andre Burakovsky also was a player that's fit in so well. And it's like the Washington Capitals had the boy version of Andre Burakovsky, and the Avalanche got the adult version, and he's been phenomenal for them. But he may have priced himself out as well. He is a guy that has scored some big goals for them. I thought he filled in so well for them this year. So it'll be interesting to see. He was playing at $4.9 million this year. And he's a guy that could be coveted around the National Hockey League. Excellent skater. He's performed very well on the wall. His two-way game has drastically improved. I think he's a guy that the Avalanche still want to have. And Josh Manson, he's the type of player every team in the National Hockey League covets. A right-handed defenseman that can play a physical, nasty game, played very well with the Avalanche. And I do believe that he's probably going to test the waters because he's going to be a hot commodity. And I look at their defensemen, they've got some key guys, and he was key for them. They can find a way if he wants to continue to play there, maybe play for a little less. I've heard people say today, a lot of people that I know and I've conversed with, that could be a chance that he goes back to Anaheim and becomes the next captain of the team. So Colorado is, you look at Nazem Kadri, best season he's ever had. He's 31 years old. And I was looking at reports that said, well, his value's at $9.1 million or so. Well, if that's the fact, the Avalanche can't keep him. And the teams that have space out there that on the cusp of becoming high quality teams, and playoff contenders, you say Detroit Red Wings have to start doing something. He'd be a great asset for them, but it's going to be tough for them to keep all of these players. And it's a tough predicament. And when you win the Stanley Cup, I think you have way more value in your status as a player, because you've been there, you've gotten it done, you've stepped up at the right time. You can count on players, and Nazem Kadri was huge for the Avalanche. But unless he wants to take a lot less than the open market will give him, I can't see him going back there.
Let's talk about some goalies. In the Toronto Maple Leafs have made it official. Matt Murray is now a member of the team. The Leafs trading a third-round pick in 2023, a seventh-round pick in 2024. The team announcing that Murray is now a member of the franchise. So, I mean, depending on which Leafs fan you encounter, some people didn't like the thought that they were going after him. Other people said, look, the guy's won 2 Stanley Cups, so bring him in. So it's official now. But in terms of the goalie market, what is the goalie market like as free agency gets set to open?
Well, there's 15 teams, almost 15 teams in the National Hockey League that need to shore up their goaltending. And the market right now, the two biggest names are Darcy Kemper and Jack Campbell. And as far as UFAs are concerned, and then you're going to have people, I think there's going to be some ridiculous trades made in the next 24 hours. But right now, Kemper, to me, has to be the number one target. A guy that played very well with the Arizona Coyotes, who stepped up at the right time and did the job for the Colorado Avalanche. And I look back to Corey Crawford in Chicago, a guy that never, got the acclaim or the accolades that he deserved. And, he won Stanley Cups for them. I look at Kemper, there's a lot of people that were picking his game apart, but once again, he was the guy that carried, he was there this season. They were a loaded team. They were a loaded weapon offensively with the players that they have. But I look at Kemper, and he's a guy that a lot of teams are going to want. And I think after what we've seen over the years out of his performance in Arizona, he's someone who's worth taking a big risk at. Jack Campbell in Toronto, probably the worst place to play, along with Philadelphia, if you're a goaltender. And he has to be a guy that, said, you know what, they're not offering what I want. They lowballed me earlier in the season. We went back with a contract. And there's other teams that covet Jack Campbell. And I think when you have a player that's disgruntled, someone's going to find a way to get him off your hands. So I think the two biggest names are Kemper and Campbell right now. John Gibson has to be a valuable trade asset for the Anaheim Ducks if they're willing to let him go. And they're a team that's in kind of a rebuild mode. He's 28, 29 years old. He's got a decent contract that a lot of teams could afford. So I think there's going to be a lot of moving and shaking with goaltenders in the next 48 hours.
He is CBS Sports HQ NHL analyst Alan May, giving us a bit of a free agency preview ahead of the Wednesday opening. Thanks, Alan. Great to see you. As we take a look at the odds for the 2023 Stanley Cup. Mentioned the Toronto Maple Leafs making a deal for Matt Murray. He is now a member of the team. They sent a third in 2023, a seventh in 2024 to the Senators for him. Avalanche plus 350 to run it back. Then Leafs at plus 900. Lightning 10-1. Then you have the President's Trophy winning Florida Panthers at 12-1 alongside the Golden Knights.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.